This is Good Morning San Diego.
Well, in a recent op-ed by former San Diego County Board of Education member Mark Powell, he says school districts will need to extend the school year to help make up for lost learning due to the pandemic. Mark Powell joins us now to explain his thoughts. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you.
Good morning, Lauren. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's sad to see some of the studies that are pointing to a loss in learning and an education gap when it comes to looking at the last school year because of being virtual and how a lot of students, unfortunately, have struggled learning that way. What are your takeaways? What is your evidence to support maybe extending the school year to help make up for some of that?
When schools shuttered in March, almost a year ago, we knew that they weren't set up for distance learning. This is something that they needed to ramp up right away. And I had two daughters attending San Diego Unified School District at the time. So since they weren't prepared, they had to do some makeshift stuff. During that makeshift period of time when they were trying to get this distance learning going, there was some learning loss. But what we found over the last year is all students have experienced learning loss, yet students of color, at-risk students, they're experiencing more learning loss than everybody, some up to a year. So when I hear school officials talk about what they're going to do to bring teachers back, I never heard anything about what we're going to do to make up for a year of learning loss. So the logical solution would be to extend the school year and make it equal to some of the other countries that have extended school years.
Yeah, this is an idea we've seen other districts talking about across the country. What logistical challenges does extending a school year give to the district were they to try to do that?
Well, growing up in San Diego, attending San Diego Unified School District, being a school teacher for San Diego Unified and a vice principal in the same district, we used to have summer school, and the school year was extended. Summer school was virtually shut down years ago, and kids have a hard time getting into it unless they're absolutely failing. So what they would need to do is tack on an additional 20 days to compete with other countries. For example, Japan has a 220-day school year. Mexico has a 200-day school year. China, in their secondary education, has 245 days. Our students are already being beat out by other countries without this pandemic. And if we don't address this, we are setting up our students for failure in the job market.
Did you get any feedback after your op-ed and it being published? Has there been any feedback? Is this something that the Board of Education or any of the school districts in the county are considering?
I haven't received any feedback from educational leaders, but I've received a ton of feedback from parents that are telling me, my kids are failing. Now take a student that was already doing poorly before the pandemic. Let's say they were getting C minus D. Some of these kids are failing. Your previous guest was just addressing it in the CIF, just saying, hey, we're going to have to rechange the way we're going to grade our kids. But guess what? It doesn't matter if you try and modify their grades. We're talking about education, their ability to get into college. And even if they do get into college, will they be successful without that basic foundation of a good education in elementary, middle, and high school?
Do you think 20 days is enough? I mean, when you compare it to other countries, like you had mentioned, it certainly seems they're going beyond that 200-day mark. Do you think 20 days would be enough to make up for this education gap that some studies are pointing to?
Lauren, that's an excellent question. So let's just go over currently what they have. Currently, we're on a 180-day school year. But we can throw out the first day and the last day of school because not a lot of education goes on. One day a week, teachers leave or they stay on campus, students leave for a minimum day. Throw in a few days for kids to be absent, throw in a couple more days for parent conferences. Our students aren't even getting 180 days. They're probably getting closer to 170 or so and minimal instruction. So for them to be competitive in a global economy and not only compete for jobs with people in our own city, they're competing for jobs for people in other countries now. They're going to have to extend it. Is 20 days enough? I don't know, but it's better than no days because right now I haven't heard anybody say they're going to do anything to help with this learning loss.
Well, we know at least San Diego Unified is having a meeting tonight to discuss a reopening plan. We'll see if perhaps extending a school year is something that comes up, but this is certainly a conversation that's happening across the country. So we'll see if it gets any traction here in San Diego. I'd be
very curious to see how they're going to address the learning loss, especially with our students of color, our at-risk students, and our students that are underserved population and underserved areas. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. Mark Powell, thank you so much for the discussion. Appreciate the time this morning.
Thank you for having me.